Hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon when you are watching this video lecture. After the discussion on the concept of demand for money in the unit 1 of chapter 3, let's move on to unit 2 of this chapter 3, which is about the concept of money supply. And in this unit, we are going to discuss about what are the various sources of money supply and how to measure this money supply, the measurement parameters of money supply, and what factors will determine the money supply, how the money supply is affected by different factors, determinants of money supply, and very importantly the concept of money multiplier as well as credit multiplier we will discuss in this unit 2 of chapter 3 related to the concept of money supply in a nutshell. Let us first of all focus on why we have to look at money supply and its various terms and scientific computational methodologies at all. In other words, what is the significance of money supply? Why should anybody look at money supply, and what is the significance of money supply in a market, in an economy? If that is the question, these are the points to be written, and we have to understand what is the significance of money supply in the following lines. First of all, definitely money plays a very crucial role in the smooth functioning of an economy, no doubt about that. And money supply is considered very much an important macroeconomic variable which is responsible for changes in the many other significant macroeconomic variables in an economy, which means the amount of money supply is going to have a significant impact on the other macroeconomic variables also. And the economic stability for any economy definitely requires that the supply of money at any point of time should be maintained at an optimum level. What is that optimum level? Of course, majorly that will be determined by the central bank of any country, but still, for the smooth functioning of an economy, for the stability of an economy, and many other significant macroeconomic variables to be healthy enough, money supply is going to be a very crucial factor. And how to achieve this optimum level of money supply is basically to accurately estimate the stock of money supply on a regular basis, and not only just estimate and have numbers, but also to appropriately regulate it in accordance with the monetary requirements of the country or economy. So naturally, whose job is that? That will be the Reserve Bank of India in Indian context. And in any other country, the central bank of that country or the federal bank of that country will take care of this requirement, and they will have to estimate the stock of money at any point of time in the economy, and they have to do that regularly, maybe quarterly. And not only that, just estimating the stock of money, also the central bank will regulate the available money in the economy according to the requirements of the country. So that will be definitely a dynamic feature of the central bank of any country. In India, it is RBI, which is going to take lead role in fulfilling this requirement of maintaining the money supply at optimum levels. That is the significance of money supply in any economy. So first of all, what is this money supply? What are we talking about in this particular unit? What is money supply? Basically, the term money supply denotes the total quantity of money available to the people in an economy. Okay, who is people, who is public? We have to have an idea of that also. But the entire amount of money that is available to the people in an economy is what is called money supply. And the amount of money available to the people in an economy is that, in other words, they have the ability to spend it or store it as a value measurement. But still, is this money supply or the quantity of money at any point of time a measurable thing? Yes, it is a measurable concept. What is the quantity of money available to the people in an economy is measurable. It can be quantified, it is measurable. Of course, who will do that measurement is once again RBI. But while doing that measurement, which we are going to do anyway later according to various indicators given by RBI, but before going to that level, we need to understand couple of things about understanding the measurement of money supply. First of all, the supply of money is a stock variable. This conceptual thing has to be known. Difference between stock and flow. Stock means at a particular point of time, whatever is available, that is called stock. So, for example, balance sheet is a stock concept for understanding purposes because it tells the financial position of an organization at a particular point of time. Cash flow is not a stock concept, it is a flow concept because it is telling us how the flow happened between two different dates. So basically when we say the measurement of money supply, it is a stock variable that refers to the total amount of money at any particular point of time. Any particular point of time. When this becomes a flow concept, when there is a change in the stock of the money, which could be increase or decrease per month, year, quarter, whatever it is, then it becomes a flow. So basically when we say money supply at any point of time in the economy, that is a stock concept. Let us say at the beginning of a year, so many lakhs of crores of rupees of money is available with the public of India, whatever that number may be. And if at all it has changed at the end of the year, increased or decreased, whatever it may be, that change is the flow. How much change happened, that is the flow. Of course, that will not happen automatically, that will be changing because of many reasons. But while studying money supply, we need to definitely understand this is not a flow concept, it is a stock concept. It is going to measure the available money with the people at any point of time only. That is one point to be noted. And second point to be noted, when we say the stock of money, we are always referring to that stock of money available to the public. So, what is public? We will see. But it is available with the public. That is what is the stock of money, what we are calling it as money supply at a particular point of time. And why public are keeping it? Of course, as a means of payments and store of value. As we know, these are the basic characteristics of money or functions of money. But who is holding this? Public is holding this money. That's what is stock of money available to the public, what we say as a concept of understanding total measurement of money supply. Of course, the money that is available with the public is always smaller than the total stock of money that really exists in the economy. That is another point to be noted. Why is that? Because there will be money maybe in the form of reserves, which is there with the Reserve Bank of India or with the commercial banks, that is not available to the public for spending or store of value, but it is there existing in the economy. So naturally the amount of money available with the public is always smaller than the total stock of money that really exists in the economy. So basically when we say money supply, usually, again, there are too many parameters with this, which we will see in the measurement of money supply later. But from a conceptual point of view, money supply denotes the total quantity of money available to the public, available to the people in the economy. Of course, those who are holding it as a means of payment and store of value. And also to be noted, the another point is, amount available with public will be always smaller than the total stock of money that is really existing in the economy. And the concept of money supply itself is not a flow concept, it is a stock concept. Now with this word public, what does it mean? That also is important to note in the context of understanding money supply. When we say public, it includes all the economic units, like what? Households, individuals like you and me, and firms, organizations, institutions, or any organization, whatever it is. Firms again should not be taken into very narrow form. People sometimes misinterpret firm means partnership firm like that. No. That is only in the context of partnership we use that word. Otherwise, wherever the word firm is used, generally we have to understand it is an organization, whatever that organization may be. Except the producers of money. Except who? The producers of money. And who are those? The government and the banking system. So that is what we are looking at. The amount of money available with the public does not include the money that is available to the banking system and the government. That is a very important point to be noted. But the word public here in this context is inclusive of all the local authorities. In India, we have central government, state governments, local authorities. So should we include local authorities also as part of the government and exclude it from the for public? No. Local authorities are included, but that means automatically who are not included in public here? Central government and state government. Those are not included, those are excluded. But local authorities are included, NBFCs, non-banking financial institutions are included, other non-departmental public sector undertakings like BSNL, BHEL, like that, so many public sector undertakings are there. They will have some money with them. They are also like any other organization. They are part of the public. They cannot be called as government. Though they are owned by government, they themselves are not government. LIC is not government itself. So they are called non-departmental PSUs, public sector undertakings. And not only that, the foreign central banks might have some rupee reserves in India. That is included here. International Monetary Fund, IMF, might have some rupee reserves. Foreign governments might have some rupee reserves. Very small amounts, but they might hold. All those things are included in the word public in the context of money supply. But what is excluded? Central government, state government, and the banking system, including RBI and commercial banks. In other words, in the standard measures of money, very important concept to be noted, interbank deposits and money held by the government and the banking system are not included. They should not be included. Whatever the money held by the government with RBI, or the money held by the banking system with RBI, or one bank holding deposit in another bank, these all things are not considered to be money supply because they are not available to the public at all. That is why these things have to be excluded from the concept of money supply. Measurement of it happens according to the formulae. Those are prescribed by various committees in Indian context, but we are not getting into that yet. Here we are only looking at concept of money supply and what is the need of money supply to be measured at all, what is the importance or significance of that, and who is public when we say that money available with the public in general is what is money supply. These are conceptual things, not very definition oriented things that we have to understand. Now, after understanding the significance of money supply itself, what is the significance of measurement of that money supply? Why money supply has to be measured on a periodic basis? We know that it has to be measured on a periodic basis, but why? What is the importance of that? What is the significance of that? First thing first, it facilitates the analysis of monetary developments, what is happening in the country, in order to provide a deeper understanding of the causes of money growth. Money is growing. If at all it is growing, why is it growing? How is it growing? In order to understand the factors which are contributing to this money growth, we need to analyze the developments that are happening in the total money supply. And who will do that? We means not us. Reserve Bank of India will definitely have this measurement for its understanding of the causes of money growth. That is one of the important factors, or we can say the significant points which has to be noted when money supply is measured. So why money supply has to be measured? Because in order to understand what are the causes of money growth in an economy, we need to first of all know how much money is there in the economy. For that you need to do the measurement of money supply. And not only that, this measurement of money supply provides a framework to evaluate whether the stock of the money in the economy is consistent with the standards for price stability. Once again, price stability, price levels, whenever they come, just for understanding purposes, we can consider that as inflation. If the inflation is very high, that means price stability is not there. That means what? Somehow the stock of money is not representing its real value. So the real value of the stock of money is less than what it is actually looking like. So whether money is in excess supply or short supply, what is happening to that, how to understand all this, whether the stock of money is in line with, inconsistent with the standards for price stability or the targets for the inflation rates, is it or not, how to measure that, how to understand that, how the Reserve Bank of India has to take monetary policy decisions which it has to take on a periodic basis, particularly quarterly. Without understanding, without measuring the money supply, how can it take? Not possible. That is why they need to evaluate what is the amount of stock of money that is available in the economy, and also they need to understand whether it is in consistence with the standards for price stability. That is the importance of measurement of money supply, we can say. Of course, the central banks all over the world adopt monetary policy. That we are going to discuss in detail in the unit 3 of this chapter. But definitely the central banks throughout the world, in India RBI, adopt monetary policy to stabilize the price level and GDP growth by directly controlling the supply of money. That is what is there in their hands. Actually, the central bank is like a tap, like the tap which is connected to a tank, let us say. If it opens the tap, more money will be flowing into the economy. If it closes the tap a little bit, money flow will stop, or sometimes it can suck the money back from the economy also. Depending upon the requirements of the economy, depending upon its assessment of how much supply of money should be there in the economy, it will definitely control the supply of money, which in turn will have impact on inflation, that is basically stabilizing the price levels, and also not just inflation but growth also. Both of them are directly and indirectly affected by the supply of money that is happening in an economy. And who is controlling that? Naturally, the Reserve Bank of India in India. So this is achieved mainly by managing the quantity of monetary base. So what is monetary base? We'll come to that once again. In other words, whatever the money that is made available, or total money that is available in the economy, can be considered as monetary base. And the success of monetary policy depends to a larger extent on the controllability of money supply and monetary base. So these are the two factors. One is controllability and the second one is monetary base itself. Both of them will definitely have to be monitored and they have to be controlled by the Reserve Bank of India. So by doing so, it tries to achieve the other macroeconomic variables to be in good shape. Whether it achieves or not, that is a different story. Always, every policy will not be really getting all the fruits that it is intended for. But yes, objective is always the same. It is to control inflation, stabilize the price levels, and to increase the growth. Actually, that is a paradox, because inflation and growth generally are going hand in hand. There are certain things which are realities. Those we cannot just learn from theories. But the reality is that definitely when the growth happens, naturally the incomes of the people will also increase. When the incomes of the people increase and they try to demand more and more goods, naturally the prices of the goods will increase. That will have an impact on the inflation, means inflation will also increase. So these are generally directly related with each other, inflation and growth. But they cannot be left like that. I want growth, but I don't care how much inflation it is. No, that is not possible. So what usually happens or traditionally happens is, at least in Indian context, government focuses on the growth much. It is more interested in GDP numbers. RBI is more focused on inflation to keep it low. So on one side, government wants growth. On the other side, RBI is doing opposite actions, wherein it tries to control the inflation and prices to be under stable situations. But it looks like it is a kind of stalemate situation. But these checks and balances are required for the economy. If unleft or unattended, the high growths can lead to higher inflations. That has been the experience of many countries in the world, and that could be dangerous also over a period of time. When inflation continues but growth stops, then it leads to stagflation, and that is going to be the worst situation for any economy, where unemployment will be high, where income levels will be low, But still prices will be high, means people are not able to buy anything with the income levels they have. So what they will do is basically starve. Very dangerous situation. Hopefully such situation should not arise. In order to avoid that, systems are in place, controls are in place. That's what RBI does. Try to control the tap of money supply, simply speaking. Money, if it is liquid, anyway it is liquid, you can easily imagine with a tank and a tap type of situation. If you open the tap, the water will flow. If you close the tap, the water will slow down or stop. That will be done by Reserve Bank of India. So that is how Reserve Bank of India takes certain monetary policy decisions for the purpose of having a overall control on the money supply and in turn on other macroeconomic aggregates like inflation and growth as well. That is the importance of measurement of money supply. In general, what are the sources of money supply? Of course, we are going to look at them in detail. What are the determinants of money supply? That will be also more or less the same. But in general, at a broader level, what are the sources of money supply? What factors the money supply in an economy depends upon? First thing first is the decision of the central bank. Central bank is of course the biggest authority to decide the total money supply. So what will be the decision of central bank, if at all required, to print the currency based on the authority conferred on it? That means to increase the monetary base itself by printing the new currency. That is one thing that definitely will have an impact on the overall money supply. So that central bank is very crucial player in the determination of money supply. That is one of the sources of money supply for sure. But is that the only source? No. It is not just the only source. In addition to that, the responses of the commercial banking system of the country also will have impact on money supply. But why the commercial banking system will have some responses? Because of certain changes in the policy variables initiated by the central bank to influence the total money supply in the economy. We'll see what kinds of actions that central bank takes to influence the total money supply in the economy as part of the monetary policy in the next unit. But at least at this point, what we should understand is whenever such a policy change happens, which is initiated by the Reserve Bank of India, there will be a response of the commercial banking system to that. How that is responding? Is it responding in line with that, or is it responding too much more than what the central bank is asking? That will also have an impact on the total money supply in the economy. Because the topic has come, though we are going to look at it later. Once again, let us just understand a simple logic. Let us say the cash reserve ratio as prescribed by central bank, just for example I am telling, not that it is really, let us say it is 10%. And by the way, when we are learning these concepts, we are learning from international perspective also. Not necessarily always we have to be looking from Indian perspective. We are taking example of India only for convenience purposes. So this logic of money supply, the theories of money supply and money demand, as we have seen earlier, these are all international theories only. Reserve Bank of India definitions, particularly if they are, those we have to look from Indian context. Everything else we have to look at a general theoretical level. Imagine if RBI says CRR is 10%, let us say, which means out of the total deposits of the bank, commercial banks, 10% has to be kept in cash for sure, compulsory. Okay. One commercial bank, let us say, has decided to keep 30% CRR. Imagine. So they can do that, let us say, without any much interference from the Reserve Bank. If they do that, what happened? Money supply, according to the Reserve Bank of India's thoughts, was different. It wanted at least 90% to be again going back into the stream. But somebody in the commercial banking system decided that they will give only 70% back into the economy. So 30% is held, 30% is blocked. Who decided that? Did Reserve Bank of India decide? No. That is a decision of commercial banking. So the point to note here for understanding purposes is, it is not just the Reserve Bank of India or the central bank of a country which only control the money supply. It is definitely one of the most important sources of money supply. But in addition to that, the responses of the commercial banking system to the policy decisions of the central bank also influence the overall money supply in the economy. That is a point to be noted in this particular situation. Now, there is another term which can be asked as a question also. What is fiat money? Simply speaking, currency, as we generally look at it. Basically, the currency that is issued by central bank is called as fiat money. Sometimes it is also called as high-powered money, though it is not the only high-powered money. But majority of the high-powered money definitely is the currency issued by central bank. Currency, once again, don't think it is only notes, currency and coins also. But when you look at the total value, notes value will be much higher than the coins value. But currency of paper or metal, whatever it is, that is issued by the central bank is called as fiat money or high-powered money. Ideally, that is backed by supporting reserves and its value is guaranteed by the government. That is when we see in any of the notes, if you can just see any note in India, for example, what is the guarantee of the government through the Reserve Bank of India governor? Looks like Urjit Patel has signed this. I promise to the bearer to pay the sum of 500 rupees. That's what is mentioned here. So that is guaranteed by government, and the same logic applies whether it is Indian currency or, for that matter, any other currency. So the American currency, the dollar, also will have a similar kind of promise. Similar but not exactly. So what it says is, this is a legal tender for public and private debt. That's what is mentioned on the dollar bills which are printed by Federal Bank of United States of America. But definitely that is guaranteed by the government, and it is supposed to be backed by the reserves which are held by the central bank of any country. So simply speaking, fiat money is nothing but currency. So the currency issued by the central bank basically is what? Liability of the central bank and also that of the government. So it is a liability of the government, definitely yes. So ideally, when there is a liability, there should be an asset also. Ideally speaking, in principle, it should be backed by an equal value of assets, mainly consisting of gold and foreign exchange reserves. This is the ideal scenario where the original concept of money has been generated. It was on the basis of that. When the currency concept has become more popular, the original concept has always been that, which is called as gold standard. Old days, gold days, or whatever those are. Much older we are talking. Those earlier days of money and its circulation, gold standard used to be there. So what was the concept behind it, just for understanding? See, basically, prior to this all paper currency and all, gold itself was the major money. Gold was money because gold coins used to be there, a small, big, whatever nature they may be, and that itself was used as money or currency those days. But that was unnecessary to carry because gold carries too much of value. That was subdivided, divided. So how to make this currency? Different people tried various things. Sometimes we ridicule this person Tughlaq, Muhammad bin Tughlaq, that he has taken some whatever wrong decisions. Maybe yes, a lot of times rulers take wrong decisions. But Tughlaq got more bad name than the other rulers, unfortunately or fortunately, whatever. For him, he definitely has this bad name. Muhammad bin Tughlaq is regarded to be one of the persons who is not so sane. But is it really true? He was the person who has started this leather currency first time. Kind of, instead of gold coins, he made leather, because that time paper was not popular yet. So what he actually started those days is what we are doing, and we call him Tughlaq, and his name is Tughlaq, not that is bad. But now in the current scenario, mostly we use that as good as a bad name. He did the same, what we are doing. Actually, he did reasonably okay because gold was kept as reserve. It was not used, and using that gold as reserve, some numbers are printed on this currency in the form of leather currency, and that was circulated so that gold need not be circulated for each and every small transaction. So that was actually a phenomenal move to make currency into a next level. But then those days it was not understood. People thought, what is this leather, and you are calling this money? People cannot believe that. Suddenly, a piece of leather, you call that money. Earlier they were all used to seeing gold as money. Suddenly some leather piece or a paper piece, if you give them, that is not money. They didn't believe him or liked that idea. So everybody thought it is a bad idea, and he is a actually insane person. Later on, what happened to the world? Everybody is following the same. At least he used leather, which is more valuable than the useless paper that we are using. That is much less valuable than leather, no? So, but useless paper that is now used as currency. But this currency, whatever is issued, should have some reserve as its backed up asset. This was always followed for centuries together by different kings and different countries. And those days, maybe Reserve Bank type of situations might not be there, but still the rulers followed this gold standard for a long time. But later, what happened, which is one of the most dangerous things that happened, but still, because it is running, it is running. In practice, what is happening now is most countries have adopted a minimum reserve system. So, just a minimum reserve system is only maintained wherein the central bank is empowered to issue currency to any extent by keeping only a certain minimum reserve of gold and foreign securities. So, just for example, if let us say 20 lakhs crores of rupees are printed by Reserve Bank of India, let us say now, ideally speaking, Reserve Bank of India should have gold reserves also worth 20 lakh crores rupees worth. That should be there. But is it having? Will it have? Ideally, it should have in principle. But now, most of the countries have stopped that gold standard. Now, just for example, once again, not that really it is the number. If it has 2 lakhs crores of worth of gold, Reserve Bank of India, keeping that as a minimum reserve, it is issuing 10 times of that. It is issuing a currency worth 20 lakhs crores of rupees. The gold it has might be only 2 lakhs crores worth of rupees. Again, I am not taking into the numbers of RBI. You can get them if at all anybody is interested. Go to RBI website, look at their balance sheet, what they have as assets, you can see that. But that is of general knowledge, nothing to do with the conceptual understanding. But this is the system that many countries are following, including India. Of course, the bad name or credit, or actually the bad credit, goes to America, who started printing dollars left and right, keeping this gold standard aside, and started using minimum reserve system. So what happened? They kept on publishing and printing dollars all those decades, since more than almost a century, we can say, almost. That is a problem. As long as the system is running, it is okay, but it is going to be a problem, because at one point and that currency will have no value at all. So that might lead to inflation also. So a lot of other issues might come with the excessive printing of currency notes. Of course, the Federal Bank and Reserve Bank will try to make sure such problem does not come and the economic stability is maintained. But in principle, if we see, definitely that is a cause of worry. But practically speaking, there is no option. So the governments or the federal banks or central banks are almost forced to do this, keeping only a minimum reserve system. The central bank is given the power to print and issue currency according to that minimum reserve system, which is base things that Reserve Bank of India is supposed to maintain as assets. Keeping that as an asset, it will issue multiple number of times of currency by printing it and circulating it into the economy. So what it will hold as a backup asset, ideally gold and foreign securities. That is called minimum reserve system. That itself can be a question. And fiat money is basically nothing but the currency that is issued by any Reserve Bank or central bank of the country. For India, naturally it is Reserve Bank of India. So the Indian 500 rupee note, everybody knows. So that is one thing which consisted this government's promise. US dollar notes are also fiat money of their country. I just wanted you to, for fun, understand and look at this number. On a currency note, maybe you would not have seen that many zeros. These zeros are code. This is not actual currency note, so that is not zeros. It is only just a design. But these are real zeros. That is the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe. Great Reserve Bank, one of the best maintained monetary policies of the world, in a sarcastic manner. What has led to what now? Look at their currency note. One currency note is $100 trillion. I don't think 100 trillion American dollars, 100 trillion Zimbabwean dollars. 100 trillion Zimbabwean dollars is one note for them. Where is 500, 2000, 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever it is we have, or some countries like America have, $1, $2, $5, 10, 20, 50, 100, like that. But Zimbabwe, what is the denomination? $100 trillion. What caused that insane number is a big story by itself. But definitely that is one of the uh, bad results of bad economic management. Some people say, what is there in economics and all. This is a proof of that. What is there in economics? If the governments of any country fail to really use the economic system in a proper manner, really not actually make the economic system better, this is the danger that any country can go through. But countries like Zimbabwe, being relatively much poorer countries, went through that in a very bad phase. So it is a failure actually, which is shown as a huge number. Maybe, I don't know exactly. With this $100 trillion, probably you might just get a chocolate there. That's all. That much inflation is there, hyperinflation. So these numbers do not show anything. That is the only point we have to understand. Whatever it is, some people say American dollar is more valuable than India. That is not exactly correct. It's about what is the acceptability of American dollar and Indian rupee in the international arena, that decides. That's what exactly it is decided. And how this acceptability and all happens in the foreign currency related scenario, that is the subject matter of fourth chapter, which we will discuss later. But just for understanding what is fiat money is nothing but the currency that is issued by any central bank, simply speaking. Now, let us move on to the role of commercial banks in the creation of money supply. Once again, at a conceptual level, not really looking into the measurements and all. Measurements is only a formula that we will anyway see. But how the commercial banks can create money supply? Banks can create money supply in the process of borrowing and lending transactions with the public. So the money so created by the commercial banks is called as credit money. And we have this concept in detail later also. The credit multiplier, or also we can call this as deposit multiplier, or we can even call it as deposit expansion multiplier. That describes the amount of additional money that is created by the commercial banks through the process of lending the available money it has in excess of the central bank's reserve requirements. So just as an example, once again, say just for example, 10% is the cash reserve ratio that is required by the banks to be maintained, means which it cannot lend to people. It cannot. Just for example, 10%, let us say. Let us say if the banks have 100 rupees deposits, 100 rupees, 100 lakhs, crores rupees, whatever you can call it, 100 deposits, it cannot lend 100 to other people, not possible. In other words, how much it can lend? Only 90 it can lend. Okay. Let us say this 90, if the bank is lending to somebody is taking that, no? As a loan, as overdraft, or whatever it may be, some credit facility the other person is taking. That is also money. What he will do with that? Either he will spend it, or of course before spending it, he will, let us say, deposit that into another bank. Same 90 rupees is deposited into another bank, or same bank also, doesn't matter. But just for example and understanding purposes, 90 rupees is lent by one bank to one person. That 90 rupees is deposited by this person into another bank. Now the other bank has 90 rupees deposits with it. What it can do now? It can lend 81 rupees out of that to somebody else, isn't it? Because that bank also is only supposed to maintain 10%. It has a deposit of 90. So in that it will only hold 9 rupees. 81 rupees it will lend to somebody. Just imagination. And that 81 goes to another individual or an institution, which will again deposit in the other bank, and that will lend again 90% of that. This chain will go on. How much it will go on? That depends upon the credit multiplier or deposit multiplier or the deposit expansion multiplier. That is the additional money created by the commercial banks. So originally money was actually from the Reserve Bank of India point of view, which was made available into the economy by RBI, was only 100. Just let us take only 2 iterations itself. That 100 back, that same 100 has become how much now? Already it became 171 with only 2 times multiplying. But in fact, it multiplies multiple number of times. And we'll see that also. In this case, it will multiply 10 times because usually the credit multiplier is 1 divided by CRR. So, till this total money available in the economy reaches 1000, this process will not stop in our example. It will keep on multiplying. Deposit in one bank, same thing is given as credit to somebody else, that is deposited into another bank, in that some percentage is given as credit to somebody else, again the chain will go on. Like this, the credit multiplier creates more money actually than what originally the Reserve Bank of India creates the high power money. That's what happens. So that is why, just for understanding purposes, in India, we have around 20 lakhs crores of rupees of currency, let us say, approximately. But our deposits are more than 1 crore, almost like 120 lakh crores deposits we have. Almost, let us say, 5 to 6 times of deposits we have. In that, even if you take, let us say, 80% is lent, that means our loans, advances which are given by the commercial banking system is almost 80 lakhs to 90 lakhs crores. 80 lakhs crores minimum, that is. What are we talking? Where is 20 lakhs crores and where is 80 lakhs crores? How much money Reserve Bank of India created in the form of fiat money? Only 20 lakhs crores. But what it has become actually when it came into the system of borrowing and lending by the commercial banks, it became 80 lakhs crores. Almost 4 times it got multiplied, let us say, just for understanding purposes. So that is the additional money generated by the commercial banking system through the process of this credit multiplier, and thus this money, whatever is so created by the commercial banks, is called as credit money. We'll have the same thing once again, but if you understand it once, it is the same thing. So basically, who will be the ones who actually influence the total money supply? 2 things we are looking at. What are the sources of money supply? One is central bank, second one is commercial banking system. How central bank influences? By creating fiat money or high powered money, that is currency basically. How the commercial banks create? Through credit multiplier concept, by giving credit to the customers. They will create this money to be multiplied number of times so that the available money, whatever is there with them, in excess of whatever the central bank's reserve requirements are, is lent to others. That leads to a series of chain of deposits and chain of borrowings, which ultimately leads to more supply of money into the economy. This concept is called credit multiplier concepts. But of course, here one of the aspects to be noted is Central Bank of India will have certain reserve requirements. Is it having certain reserve requirements? Definitely yes. That's what we call popularly as the CRR, cash reserve ratio. We'll come to that also later. But from the basic concept understanding point of view of money supply, these are the things to be noted. Now let us enter into the measurement of money supply, very crucial aspect in this chapter. Problems can also be expected from this. So how the money supply is measured in India? So far, whatever we have looked at, these are conceptual things, whether it is credit multiplier, whether it is fiat money, these are applicable throughout the world. What is money supply, why money supply is important for an economy, all the aspects that we discussed so far are almost pretty much international concepts. Anywhere they can apply. But here, when we look at these things, like M1, M2, M3, M4 and all, these are the measurements applied only in India. Maybe other countries also will have in a similar lines, not necessarily in the same terminology or the same kind of definition. So we have to understand these measurement, what we are looking at, money supply measurement in India only is what is our focus area here. So RBI has been publishing the data on the 4 alternative measures of money supply denoted by M1, M2, M3 and M4 besides the reserve money. What is reserve money? We'll come to that. And it has specified them in the descending order of liquidity. So that means what? M1 is the most liquid, M4 is the least liquid of the 4 measures. That is a point to be noted. So this is in the descending order of liquidity. So what is the most liquid money that we can call it? That can be also called as sometimes narrow money, M1. is also popularly called as narrow money. Most liquid form of money which is available in the economy is this. What is that? First of all, currency notes and coins with the people, plus demand deposits of the banks. Demand deposits, not time deposits. We have to distinguish them. Demand deposits basically are also called as savings and current deposits accounts, also called as CASA accounts. Popular name, that is CASA. CASA means current account, savings account. Those are the demand deposits of the people with the banks. So currency notes and coins with the people, plus demand deposits of the banks, plus other deposits of RBI. This is something very, very small one. Other deposits of RBI generally include some money deposits in rupee currency held in Reserve Bank of India by IMF, by other foreign governments. Those are all other deposits of RBI. That will not be a big amount. It will be hardly less than 1% of the total money. Majorly, what is M1? Is currency notes and coins with the people. People here are there which are using that currency notes and coins, and plus demand deposits of the banks. That means CASA accounts, deposits, also to be included in the narrow money and most liquid thing, right? People can spend it. Anytime they can spend it, just like that. And we're not talking any credit and all here. Basically, whatever the demand deposits of the people are there with the banks, people here include basically institutions as well as individual and households. That is all something that they can spend anytime if they want, except in a very rare situation of demonetization or any other moratorium. Normally, that is the money which is liquid, can be spent anytime by the people, though it is not going to be spent like that. That's a different story. But the possibility is, yes, it is the most liquid form of money. That is called M1. Currency notes plus demand deposits plus other deposits of the RBI. M2 is nothing but M1 plus, we are having another addition here, savings deposits with post office savings banks. That is also as good as a commercial bank only in India. Post office has a lot of savings bank accounts with it. Adding that also to M1, we get M2. You need to remember all these formulae, by the way. All these things have to be remembered. As I said, problems can be asked from this. So M1 plus post office savings bank account deposits is called M2. Then M3 is different. M3 is M1 plus, not M2 plus. M1 plus net time deposits with the banking system. M1 is again originally only demand deposits was taken. Now M3 takes, of course, M1, which includes already the currency notes plus demand deposits plus other deposits plus time deposits with the banking system also included in M3. And M4 takes M3 plus total deposits with the post office savings organization, not just once again savings bank accounts. Post office also will have its own schemes and fixed deposits, recurring deposits, term deposits, time deposits will be there in post office. Those are also added here. So we call it total deposits, including savings bank accounts, time and demand deposits with the post office, excluding national savings certificates. Other than that, everything else is included here. Why? Once again, simply because national savings certificates is the way, one way government of India is taking loan from the public directly. It is a part of public debt. So only post office is acting like a real postman. It is only just taking our money to government. So national savings certificates, that is why it is not included, because it is of government's money, people's money lent to government. That is different. Other than that, people's money with the post office in the form of time or demand deposits is included in M4, plus M3 is also taken into consideration. So these are the four things which are called as money supply aggregates, but these are old aggregates. They have been little bit revised later, we'll see them also. But unless otherwise mentioned, more than the new aggregates, these are the popular things which even RBI publishes now also. Just because new aggregates are there, RBI did not stop publishing. RBI publishes these things also. M1 narrow money, M4 is almost the broad money. In the order of descending order of liquidity, this is how money supply is measured in India. You need to remember all these formulae. M1, M2, M3 and M4. That is how money supply is measured in India. Now the question comes, what is reserve money? Very important question. Reserve money means what? Reserve money is what? That is the currency in circulation plus bankers deposits with RBI plus other deposits with RBI. That is called reserve money. Currency in circulation, of course, public have money, currency includes coins always. Plus bankers deposits with RBI, bankers will need to keep certain deposits with RBI, that is included here. Plus other deposits with RBI also is included in the reserve money. Of course, that will be equal to this. This one you don't need to really remember. Just for understanding purposes, that will be equal to what? In effect, the net Reserve Bank of India credit to the government, plus RBI credit to the commercial sector, plus RBI's claims on the banks, plus RBI's net foreign assets, plus government's currency liabilities to the public, which is nothing but currency in circulation, minus RBI's net monetary liabilities. All of this, if it is done, we don't need to do that. Of course, if the question comes with these data, then we should be able to do that. All are added. Only one deduction is RBI's net non-monetary liabilities will have to be deducted, if any. Other than that, all these are basically the RBI's liabilities, we can say. RBI's credit to the government, RBI's credit to the commercial sector, RBI's claims on the banks, those are all assets of the RBI. And RBI's net foreign assets is also an asset of the RBI. Government liability to the public is the asset of the RBI, liability to the government. So, which is nothing but currency in circulation. So, all these things are part of reserve money. In simple way, it can be calculated only adding these three things: currency in circulation, bankers deposits with RBI, plus other deposits with RBI. That is reserve money. Short note question, very much can be expected on this. And I have to just write a little bit of explanation on that also. What is this reserve money? This reserve money is also known as central bank money, sometimes called base money, also called high powered money, and that determines the level of liquidity and the price levels in the economy. So this is the one which is in the hands of RBI. It is the tap that RBI holds. That is the reserve money, which is the reserve bank money or central bank money, we can say. That is called reserve money, or high powered money, base money, monetary base, central bank money, any of the names can be given. That is one more special monetary aggregate in addition to the M1, M2, M3, M4, which are published by Reserve Bank of India, about how much money supply is there at any point of time in India. But now if you observe closely, M1 and reserve money are looking similar, isn't it? M1, what it was? Currency notes and coins with people. Okay. Here also we have currency in circulation, more or less same. Then it has demand deposits of banks. That means people's money with the banks in the form of CASA accounts. But that is different here. Here bankers deposits with RBI is there. Here it is people's deposits with banks in the case of M1. In the case of reserve money, it is bankers deposits with RBI. Other deposits with RBI is same. So what is the only difference here majorly between M1 and reserve money? That can be a separate question. What is the difference between M1 and reserve money? First of all, M1 is defined as the sum of currency held by public, demand deposits of the banks and other deposits of RBI, as we have just now seen. Then what is reserve money? You need to define that. If this question is also possible to be asked, because it covers both M1 as well as reserve money. So you should first define M1, then define reserve money, which comprises of currency held by public once again, plus cash reserves of the banks with whom? With RBI, plus other deposits of RBI. So on comparison, we find that the difference between M1 and reserve money is what? The former means M1 includes the demand deposits, whereas the latter means reserve money includes the cash reserves of the banks. So the cash reserves of the banks means what? The money that is held by the commercial banks with the RBI. That's what we called it as bankers deposits with RBI. And that is determined by what? That is determined by generally CRR. The reserves, what we are looking at as cash reserves of the banks, are going to be there as commercial banks deposits with the central bank, and they will be done for maintaining the CRR. In India we call it as CRR, that is cash reserve ratio, and as working funds for clearing adjustments. Of course, clearing adjustments from one bank to another bank can happen with RBI, but how that is possible? When the commercial banks have some cash deposits with the Reserve Bank of India. That's what is CRR. Tells how much is to be there in the Reserve Bank of India held by commercial banks, but that will be included in the reserve money, but not M1. M1 includes the demand deposits of the people with the commercial banks. Reserve money includes the reserves of the commercial banks with RBI. Cash reserves of the commercial banks with RBI. So that is the core difference between M1 and reserve money. They are not same. That we have to understand. M1 is the thing that is available to the public for utilization. Reserve money is not available to the public completely for utilization. It includes the cash reserves of banks with RBI, which is not available to public, but it is also part of the overall money supply. That's what is reserve money. And now the question comes, and a very important concept, one of the policy measures of Reserve Bank of India also is CRR. Of course, the concept is applied in many countries, but the name may be little different in other countries. In India, we call this as cash reserve ratio, CRR. So in any country, the banks are required to maintain deposits with the central bank to meet the central bank's prescribed reserve requirements, or that's what is called as CRR, and that is also there to be maintained to meet the settlement obligations of the commercial banks. So the amount of money that is required to be maintained by the commercial banks with the central bank in accordance with the CRR is what is the reserves of commercial banks with RBI, we can say in Indian context. So they represent, simply speaking, the balances maintained by the banks. In simple words, this CRR or reserves are going to represent the balances maintained by the banks in the current account with whom in India, Reserve Bank of India. So where is it included, in M1 or reserve money? It is included in M1. CRR is a ratio, that is not an amount, but according to that ratio, certain amount of reserves have to be maintained as deposits by commercial banks with Reserve Bank of India, and that amount is determined by this ratio. That ratio is called as CRR, or cash reserve ratio. These are the basic things related to the measurement of money supply in India. M1, M2, M3, M4 formula you should know. Reserve money formula we should know. Reserve money actually is same in old and new concepts also. And what is the difference between M1 and reserve money? Important aspect. And what is CRR first of all? What is the impact of CRR? Impact of CRR is what? Basically when the CRR is more, what happens? More money has to be kept by the commercial banks with RBI. That means the money supply in the market will become lesser. In the economy, the money pumping will be lesser. So how the RBI controls the money supply? By taking the measures like, as I told, increasing the money supply or decreasing the money supply by opening the tap. CRR is one of the measures. It is not the only tap. RBI will have so many taps, so many equipments with which it can control the money supply. CRR is one of them. Let us say if CRR has increased, naturally the money supply will decrease. Why? Because the banks will keep more money into the Reserve Bank of India idle. That is not with public, that is with RBI. So amount available with the public, which is part of money supply, will become lesser. On the contrary, reverse will happen. If CRR is reduced, that means banks are now empowered and allowed to lend more to the people. And when the banks start doing that, more and more money supply will happen into the economy. That is how these things will definitely will have a huge impact on overall money supply. This CRR is a very important factor also as a determinant of money supply. Now let us just quickly go through the new monetary aggregates. Practically speaking, from the examination point of view, M1, M2, M3 are more important. Definitely they are crucial. But new, because they are new, and if they are asked also, we should not be in a position that we cannot answer it. So that is why also remember these three new economic monetary aggregates actually. M1, M2, M3, M4 are old system. NM1, NM2, NM3 is the new system. Logic is more or less the same, but little bit changes there in this new system. So NM1, what it includes? Currency with public, plus demand deposits with the banking system, plus other deposits with RBI. See, more or less the same. NM2, NM1 plus short-term time deposits of residents. So here they have made classification of time deposits, which was their part of M3, their old. Here that M3 is split into NM2 and NM3. In this, NM2 includes short-term time deposits, whereas NM3 includes Short term also anyway, because NM2 is already included in NM3. Plus long term time deposits also are included. Of course, what is short term? Where the maturity is of up to 1 year, which is any time deposit or a fixed deposit with a maturity of more than 1 year, that will not be part of NM2, but that will be part of NM3. So NM3 is basically what? NM2 plus long term time deposits, and not only that, call or term funding from financial institutions is also included here. So financial institutions are giving some funding. Those amounts are also included in NM3, which was not there earlier. So it is made a little broader scope compared to the earlier, but NM1 and M1 are more or less the same. There the post office was separately mentioned. Here we don't have to specially mention the post office. Banking system includes post office. Actually, in fact, nowadays post office itself is a bank. It is a postal bank. So that is also part of the banking system. So currency with the public plus demand deposits with the banking system plus other deposits with RBI is NM1. That plus short-term time deposits of residents is NM2. That plus long-term time deposit of residents plus call or term funding from financial institutions is NM3. So that's what are the new monetary aggregates. Of course, even in this case, these are mentioned in the descending order of liquidity. NM1 is most liquid, NM3 is less liquid. But the story will not stop there. Further, it will continue to be liquidity aggregates. So earlier we had monetary aggregates. Now, in addition to the monetary aggregates, new system of nomenclature and different measurements have emerged, which will also publish liquidity aggregates. So what are going to be there here? So liquidity aggregates included this post office savings banks also. That means this NM1 did not include them. NM1 had only banking system, but as far as postal bank is concerned, whether it is considered as banking system or not is a questionable thing. Okay, as far as this definition is concerned, this NM1 did not include post office. Now we are including post office where? In the liquidity aggregates. So in L1, NM3 is the starting point. So it is a continuation, we can say. NM1, NM2, NM3 continuing. That NM3 is the starting point for L1 plus all deposits with the post office savings bank, all. Excluding national savings certificates, that is always there. That is L1. That is one of the liquidity aggregates. L2 is what? Once again starting from L1 only. So here at least there is no disconnect between one and the other. It is a continuous story. NM2 is NM1 plus something, NM3 is NM2 plus something, and L1 is NM3 plus something, L2 is L1 plus something. That means it already includes all NM1, LM2 and NM3. So L1 plus what? Term deposits with the term lending institutions and refinancing institutions called FIs, refinancing institutions, and not only that, term borrowing by the refinancing institutions, certificate of deposits issued by the refinancing institutions or lending institutions. So those are also included here in L2. Then L3 includes L2 plus public deposits of NBFCs. NBFCs means non-banking financial companies also are included in L3. That is where the broadest definition of liquidity aggregate we can say. So these are liquidity aggregates. Again, theoretically, just remember the formula in general. But if questions are asked with numbers, all that you need to do is add. But which one to be added is definitely something to be remembered and applied if numerical questions are asked on this. But good thing in the new monetary and liquidity aggregates is it is a continuous thing. First NM1, then NM2, then 3, then L1, L2, L3. These are the various aspects of measurement of money supply in India. And I would rather say, as far as these formulae are concerned, new economic aggregates or monetary aggregates and liquidity aggregates, you just remember them well. Same names will be given in the question. So bluntly speaking, don't hesitate to by heart them, because there is nothing for us to understand in that. What is each of them representing, that we should understand. But why is that only? Who are we to decide? RBI told that the system that RBI is following is this. What is here? Why M1 only is like that? Why M2 is including only this? That those things. Why reserve money is only this? This formula we cannot question. These are not something like conceptual formulae for understanding purposes like financial management or costing. These are the things which RBI is expressing. These are because it is not only expressing M1, M2, M3, M4, right? All of them it is expressing, and it is only just telling that okay, M1 is most liquid, then less liquid, then less liquid, then less liquid. measurements are just expressed like this. These are only realities actually there in the market, in the economy, measured by Reserve Bank of India and expressed like this. So when that is the only just a formula to be followed for computational purposes, there is nothing much about why this only, why that only, why not that. Such kind of why will not appear and have much of importance as far as these things are concerned. That is why remember this formula very well. Same names will be given definitely in the question. All that you need to do is pick the correct names and use correct formula, substitute, and just additions is all that we need to do while calculating the new or old monetary aggregates and the new liquidity aggregates. Liquidity aggregates are continuation of the new monetary aggregates only. These formulae have to be remembered well for solving the problems that we might encounter in this examination. So try to revise them before going to the examination very well, because you have to remember them more than understanding anything. Memory is important in that case. Understanding happens in the conceptual things, something like this. As we discussed earlier already, it is just an extension of that. What are the sources of money supply, we said earlier. Now we are calling it as what are the determinants of money supply. Ultimately, the determinants of money supply will be, as discussed earlier, central bank of any country and commercial banks. But the angle of what kind of factors might have impact on money supply is not just told in one way. There are two different alternate theories. First theory says, or first view says, money supply is determined exogenously, externally, let us say, by central bank. Of course, none of them is a foolproof view, which by itself is 100% correct. And the second view says, the money supply is determined endogenously, that means internally, by the changes in the economic activities, which affect the people's desire to hold currency relative to the deposits and rate of interest, etc. So first thing says, all powerful central bank of any country. In other words, in India, Reserve Bank of India is the main determinant of money supply, and nothing wrong in that. This is correct also. But is it the only thing? No, it is not. There is other things also according to the second view, which say not just exogenously, boss. Even the money supply is determined endogenously. So exogenously means externally by somebody, like an authority of the country called central bank. Endogenously means within the economy, within the people, among themselves, according to their desire to hold currency is one factor. Or even interest rate also can be another factor, of course. That is also determined ultimately by central bank only. But actually speaking, none of them by itself can be completely correct. So what we can say, yes, Reserve Bank of India has its role, yes, people's desire also has its role, and yes, interest rate also has its role. All of them collectively and cumulatively will determine the money supply. That is the best view, and that is what is the more practical and contemporary view called as money multiplier approach. So the first view, second view, both of them were having only half of the story covered. They are not covering the full story. The full story of what are the determinants of money supply is covered by which approach? That is called money multiplier approach. What it tells? It tells that the total supply of the nominal money in the economy is determined by the joint behavior, not separately. Joint behavior of what? Three things, very crucial. One, of course, central bank. Two is commercial banks, and three also public. So three behavioral aspects will put together have an impact on the money supply. So if at all the question comes, what are the things that are going to impact money supply? One is, of course, in India, Reserve Bank of India, then commercial banks and public behavior. All of them will have an impact on money supply. And we can understand from the money multiplier approach how these will have an impact on money supply in a very close manner. Let us start with that. For that, we should understand what is this money multiplier. Let me once again just make it clear. Credit multiplier is different, money multiplier is different. Okay? Money multiplier concept is what we are looking at, which is a combination of many other factors. So it will have a subset called credit multiplier. But money multiplier is a broader concept than credit multiplier. So we'll see the difference between them later. But now what we are looking at is money multiplier concept. So what is money multiplier? In general, the money supply is defined like this. M is equal to capital M, that is equal to small m plus, multiplied with MB, that is monetary base. So what is big M, capital M? That is money supply. What is small m is what we are calling it as money multiplier. MB is basically the monetary base or high powered money, which we already discussed. The high powered money is the reserve money, the money that is with the Reserve Bank of India. That is called high powered money. Reserve money you can call it also. That is the monetary base of the entire country. So that monetary base multiplied with the money multiplier makes the money supply, that is M. So now comes what is M, small m. Naturally, it's no big deal. M divided by MB, that is going to be the multiplier. So basically what money multiplier M is telling us, it is defined as a ratio that relates to the changes in money supply to a given change in the monetary base. So for every change in monetary base, let us say monetary base increased by 2%, just for example. Just let us say monetary base increased by 2%. Let us say money supply has actually increased by 10%. If that is the case, what is the money multiplier? 5 times. So for a small percentage of increase in monetary base, money supply has increased tremendously. How is it possible? What is this magic? There is no magic in that. That is money multiplier M, small m. That is M divided by M is capital M, money supply. Let us like this rather than getting confused with small m, big M. Money multiplier is nothing but MS by MB. Money supply divided by monetary base. That is the money multiplier. What it tells us? It denotes by how much the money supply will change for a given change in the high powered money. High powered money is nothing but monetary base. For a change in the high powered money or monetary base which is in the denominator, how much the numerator, which is money supply, changing, that is indicated by the multiplier. Very important concept and a question. And the multiplier indicates what multiple of monetary base is transformed into money supply. Monetary base entirely may not be transformed into money supply all the times. It may be tremendously highly transformed into money supply, sometimes not also. Whatever it is, that is indicated by the money multiplier. In other words, how many times the monetary base has been transformed into money supply is indicated by money multiplier, denoted by small m, a very important concept. Formula for that is money supply divided by monetary base. That is money multiplier concept. And how this money multiplier can be useful in understanding the supply of money. As we already discussed, the money multiplier approach is different. Money multiplier is different, of course, which is part of the money multiplier approach. The other approaches were only looking at exogenous factors and endogenous factors. Money multiplier approach talked about 3 different factors, and a joint behavior of them will have an impact on money supply, is what money multiplier approach tells us. And joint behavior of what? Central bank, commercial banks, and the public. And while understanding what is money multiplier is a different thing. That is the way the total money supply responds to any change in the monetary base. How much increase in the monetary base is going to lead to how much increase in the supply of the money is what is indicated by money multiplier. And in this approach of money multiplier approach, how the money multiplier approach can be understood or applied, we can say, while looking at supply of money. So here, this approach majorly was propounded by Milton Friedman and Anna Schwartz. You don't need to remember those names. If you can, it's okay. Otherwise, don't worry. But the concept is important. The money multiplier approach considers 3 factors as immediate determinants of money supply. So what are the determinants of money supply according to money multiplier approach? Already as we discussed, 3 things. One is the stock of the high powered money. Stock of the high powered money, who decides that? Who decides that? Naturally, the central bank decides that. And the ratio of reserves to the deposits. Reserves to the deposits also is decided by central bank, but for convenience purposes, let us call this as Reserve Bank of India rather than central bank all the times. RBI decides this. Commercial banks decides this. Excess reserves to deposits actually. Reserves to deposit is something like CRR. Let us say RBI says 10% you have to maintain CRR, then there is no problem. But if any commercial bank is deciding to maintain more than that, that is called excess reserves. So excess reserves to deposits, who decides that? That is decided by commercial banks. And the ratio of currency to deposits, that who decides? That public, common people will decide in the country how much they want to hold in the banking system as deposits, or how much they want to hold in their hand as currency. So the ratio of currency to deposits demonstrates the behavior of general public. So according to money multiplier approach as propounded by Milton Friedman and Anna Schwartz, all the three jointly will determine the money supply in total in an economy. And the behavior of which people? The behavior of central bank, the behavior of the commercial banks, as well as the behavior of the general public respectively will have an impact on the overall supply of money. And each of them here are respectively told here are representing the behavior of central bank, commercial banks and general public. So what is the behavior of central bank we are calling? Of course, central bank's behavior is about the stock of high powered money. Can it increase or decrease? Yes, that is in its hands. That is one thing that Reserve Bank can decide upon. And not only that, it can even create a CRR ratio to be increased or decreased also. And as we discussed earlier, if CRR has increased, money supply will decrease and vice versa. So Reserve Bank will have an impact on the money supply. Definitely more and direct impact will be there on the money supply. That sums up the behavior of central bank, which is evident. Of course, we see that in the next unit, monetary policy in detail. But majorly the behavior of commercial banks also will have an impact. Why is that? Because commercial banks may resort to keeping excess reserves than they are supposed to maintain as cash reserves as prescribed by RBI. In that case, the money supply will be little bit lesser if the excess reserves are maintained by the commercial banks. So that is the decision of the commercial banks. There is no rule that all the money that they can lend, they have to lend. They will lend if they find a person who is credit worthy. Otherwise, they don't lend. Otherwise, they will not even care about people who are asking for loans and all. They will lend if they find a person who is okay, who can repay, who has the ability to pay. If that is the case, then they will lend. Otherwise, they don't lend. Means what? They keep with them large reserves over and above the CRR what they are supposed to maintain. Those are called excess reserves, and that will block the money supply. That will clog the money supply. Definitely that is not in the hands of RBI to clean it. That Reserve Bank cannot directly interfere into that, but that is the decision of commercial banks. Then people behavior. People behavior is their choice, their whims and fancies. What is the basic characteristics of the people? Nowadays, let us say financial innovation is more. We are able to do a lot of online payments, transactions, everything is through mobile phones or computers. Then what happens naturally? People will hold less currency. People will hold more in banking system than in the form of currency or cash actually. So that is good because more money in the banking system creates credit multiplier. If the money is in the form of currency with the people, that is once again stopping the overall money supply to be increased. So these are the three things that will determine overall money supply in an economy according to that money multiplier approach. Then the same thing as we just discussed, such a question can be asked: what are these excess reserves by commercial banks? First thing first, when the commercial banks keep with them a higher than statutorily required percentage, if they keep of course they are supposed to maintain certain percentage of their deposits in the form of cash reserves. Nothing, no doubt in that. That's what is CRR. You have to follow this. But if they keep with them higher than the statutorily required percentage of their deposits in the form of cash reserves, they are called as excess reserves of the commercial banks. Are they good or bad? Banks will have the decision on them. Definitely they think it is good, but it is not good for the economy. Why? Because these excess reserves do not lead to creation of money, since the money which is injected by RBI into the banking system is blocked in the system by these banks. That is where this money is clogged, it is blocked, it is not entering. So the liquid nature of money is now solidified by these commercial banks. by maintaining these excess reserves. Why do they maintain this? Of course, as I said, many factors in the form of the ability of the people to repay and the percentage of non-performing assets that they have. If that is already on a very high level, naturally the banks will become very conservative. They will not give too much of loans to the people. So they keep excessive reserves. But can they keep excessive reserves all the times? No, that is not their business. Nobody can keep 80% of their deposits with them only without lending. Then what is the use of the bank? Bank is supposed to take deposits from the people and give this money, lend it to somebody else. And the differential interest is what is their income. Simple business of the banks is that. If they keep the deposits of the people with them only without lending to others, too much of cash reserves it has, that is stopping the economy, that is stopping the overall liquidity process of an economy. And not only that, that cannot be sustained also by the banks, since this income is not coming from the interest earned, but expenditure on deposits they are continuing to incur. So they themselves will enter into huge losses. So they will not maintain very excessive reserves, but they do maintain some excessive reserves depending upon the economic condition of the country. But not only that, there are some factors which will particularly influence these excess reserves. First thing first, very important factor is market interest rates. That is one thing. And the expected deposit outflows, means how much people might withdraw the money. When the people really ask the money, if you say, sorry, I don't have money, they lose the system in the banking, they lose trust in the banking system. So definitely the expected deposit outflows, the banks will have an overall estimate and they try to keep it in the form of cash with them over and above the CRR that the RBI anyway asks them. So if there is no expected deposit outflow much, then why to keep excessive reserves? They don't do that. Because that is not their business to hold money. Their business is to lend money to others, earn interest. That is why bank is there. So ultimately, that will have impact on the decision of the commercial banks whether to hold excess reserves. If yes, how much excess reserves. But more than this, market interest rates also will have a very big impact on the excess reserves. So the factors that will affect the cost and benefits of the excess reserves are two things. One is the expected deposit outflows, and two, the market interest rates. That itself can be a question. So when deposit outflows are expected to be more, naturally the banks will maintain more excess reserves, and market interest rates, if they are high, then the excess reserves will be low. Why? Because the opportunity cost of holding these cash idle becomes high when the market interest rates are high. That is why the excess reserve ratio E, what we are calling it here, is negatively related to the market interest rate. When the market interest rate is high, naturally the opportunity cost of holding these excess reserves is also high. That means there is no incentive for the banks to hold the excess reserves. So slowly what they will do, they will lend them to the deserving people. So that is how the excess reserves by commercial banks, if they are increasing, then money supply will decrease. As simple as that. If stock of high power money increases, overall money supply will increase. If excess reserves increase, then money supply will decrease. If CRR increases, money supply will decrease. And the next one also let us see, that is currency to deposits. You can just look at that. If currency to deposits increases, that means people want to keep money more in the form of currency than deposits. That is not a good thing. That also will decrease the money supply. So how each of these factors is affecting money supply, even practical questions can be asked from this. We should conceptually understand there is nothing to by heart in this. If there is anything to by heart, those are the monetary and liquidity aggregates. Those are the things to be remembered. But these all things can be just understood from conceptual point of view. Naturally, when the CRR is more, the money in the form of cash that banks have to keep with the Reserve Bank of India become more. That means to that extent, the money that is available to public will become less. That means money supply got reduced. Same way, when the market interest rates are high, then the opportunity cost of holding the excess reserves will be also high. So naturally the banks will reduce the excess reserves, and that will keep more money pumped into the economy. Like from the commercial banks. It's a different story that since already market interest rates are high, people may not be willing to borrow. That is again a balancing act. Banks would like to lend, people may not like to borrow. On the other side, people would like to borrow, banks may not like to lend. Both of these things will happen according to economic conditions and various other factors like income levels of the people. Those things are not what we are looking at. We are particularly focusing on the bank or the Reserve Bank of India's role and commercial banks' role. Commercial banks' role is this: if they keep up to the statutory limits of cash, there is no problem. If they keep excess reserves, basically they are obstructing the money supply, we can say. They are clogging the money supply. Ideally, they should not do, but depends upon their decision, they do that. And then coming to the third influencer of money supply, that is public behavior. How can public behavior also affect the money supply? Can it affect? Of course, yes. So the behavior of the public also influences the bank credit through the decision on a ratio of what? Currency to the deposits. You can call it as C by D, also called as currency ratio. Naturally, when it will be high, when the numerator is higher than denominator, or when the numerator is tending to be higher than the denominator. So if the C by D ratio is higher, that automatically means people want to keep more money in currency, less money in deposits. Then only the resultant will be higher. No? Either numerator should be higher or denominator should be lower. But both will happen simultaneously. Numerator higher, denominator lower means the C by D ratio or currency ratio is higher, which makes the money supply lesser. So E also, the excess reserve ratio also has a negative impact on the money supply. Currency ratio also has a negative impact on the money supply. CRR also has a negative impact on the money supply. Increase of any of these things will decrease the overall money supply, because deposits, when they are reduced in the bank, the credit multiplier will not happen. When credit multiplier will not happen, money multiplier also will not happen. So that is the main point here. People having currency in their hands is not going to create additional money supply. That is idle. That is just there. Additional money generation happens through commercial banking system. If you keep 100 rupees with you, that is not going to add any value to the entire economy other than you buying something with that. Of course, that will have its own multiplier effect. That is a different story. But monetarily, the same 100 rupees will go from one person to another person. No extra money generated from that 100 rupees. But if you kept that in the bank, that bank gives this, if not 100, at least 80, let us say, to other person, and that person takes that as a loan and keeps in another bank, and that bank gives some percentage of that, like 64 rupees, let us say, to another person. Like this goes on. So the credit multiplier automatically adds to the money multiplier, and because of that, the money supply also will become better and better if more money is in the banking system. If more money is with the cash form, currency form, with the people, then that is not going to be adding to the money supply, rather it is obstructing the overall money supply. That is a conceptual point we have to always keep in mind. But is the only ratio, currency ratio, which is determined by the public behavior? No. Public behavior also is going to have an impact on TD DD ratio, that is time deposit demand deposit ratio. Then also time deposit by demand deposits. Logically you can understand, time deposit is long term, demand deposit is short term. If people are keeping more money in this time deposits than demand deposits, that means what? The banks will have more money to be lent. They have the cushion to lend it to others. If it is demand deposits only, then banks may think that at any point of time this customer can ask this money back, so I have to keep cash balance ready. So naturally what happens, when the time deposit to demand deposit ratio is there, where how much money is kept as time deposit compared to the demand deposits, that also has an important implication for the money multiplier, and also naturally because of that the money stock in the economy or money supply in the economy. So what happens here, when a TD by DD ratio increases, as an example let us say, that means what? There is greater availability of free reserves and consequent enlargement of volume of multiple deposit expansion that happens, and monetary expansion also happens because of that, because now the banks can lend to some other person, and that person will deposit in another bank, and that bank will lend to another person. So this process of deposit expansion or monetary expansion is possible when the time deposits are more than demand deposits. On the contrary, if the demand deposits are more, then naturally that will obstruct the money multiplier, and that will obstruct and that will reduce the money supply. So each of these factors, who will decide whether when you go to a bank whether I should may take a time deposit or a demand deposit? Who will decide? Public only will decide. That also is part of their behavior. So their behavior to hold more currency or less currency, to hold cash or to keep money in the banks, that is the behavior of the public. That is a decision that public will take according to their banking habits. That decision will have an impact on money supply. If currency ratio is higher, money supply will be lower. On the contrary, if TD by DD is higher, then the money supply will be higher, because that creates deposit expansion and monetary expansion simultaneously. And how that happens, as we discussed earlier, this is again a very crucial concept. That happens through credit multiplier, or also we can call it as a deposit multiplier or deposit expansion multiplier. Same example as we have taken earlier. Somebody has given 100 rupees to a bank, let us say, that has kept 10 rupees reserve and lent 90 to other, that has kept 10% reserve and lent 81 to other, that has kept let us say another 8 rupees and say 73 to other. Like this keeps on going. But where we started only with 100 rupees, but how many times it is going to create money? Multiple number of times. Till when? Till when it creates, that depends upon the CRR and credit multiplier. So credit multiplier is what basically here is the deposit expansion multiplier or deposit multiplier. What it is describing is the amount of additional money created by the commercial banks through the process of lending the available money that it has in excess of the central bank's reserve requirements. The same thing as we already discussed earlier also. But what is the formula for credit multiplier? 1 divided by CRR. That also we just discussed earlier. So if CRR is 10%, let us say, then credit multiplier is 10 times. That means this 100 becomes how much? 1000 it becomes overall. And the entire economy, if you see, that becomes 1000 as an example. But if CRR is 20%, let us say, then the credit multiplier will be 5. 5 times it will create. The same 100 rupees creates 500 rupees worth of money in the economy. And the people who are borrowing, they are not just keeping it, na? They are going to use it. So that will generate economic activity also more than the original money with which the country or economy has originally started. So this is what is credit multiplier. And naturally the banks use demand deposits for lending for lending the money to the others. That sets in motion a series of activities leading to the expansion of money, and that is not backed by the money proper or proper money. There is no backing of proper money. Proper money is only 100, but that has created 1000 rupees worth if CRR is 10%. If CRR is 20%, this would create 500 rupees worth of overall money supply in the market. So how credit multiplier can be calculated? 1 divided by CRR. That is the concept of credit multiplier, which is created by borrowing and lending mechanism of the banks, which creates into a chain of lending, and that leads to expansion of money, though there is no proper backing of actual money. That is a point to be noted about credit multiplier. Now this distinction also to be clearly understood. What is the distinction between money multiplier and credit multiplier? Are they both the same? Will credit multiplier be equal to money multiplier? Generally no. Generally no. Why? Because the credit multiplier or money multiplier are closely related but not same. Why? Because we know that banks do not lend out all the available money, but instead they maintain reserves at a level above the minimum required reserves. So here we are ideally taking that if CRR is 20%, 5 times is the credit multiplier. But is it really going to be so? Not necessarily. Why? Because this is only one factor. Commercial banks is only one factor. Still, it is going to have a decision that commercial banks have to take if they are maintaining any excess reserves also. If they maintain excess reserves over and above the minimum required reserves, that means this credit multiplier is not working 5 times. Maybe it is working lesser than that. That is one point because of which credit multiplier and money multiplier need not be same. So just 5 times is credit multiplier, which is a theoretical thing, but is it really converting it to be a money multiplier? Not necessarily. And also another thing, this example or credit multiplier concept is assuming that the 90 rupees which is borrowed by the bank, which is lent by the bank, is going to be spent by the person who is borrowing it, or at least is going to deposit it in another bank. But not necessarily. What if the borrower has taken money that he has borrowed? Not necessarily he is spending every rupee. Maybe if they are keeping that money borrowed from the bank into cash. So what effectively happened? This chain has broken. This amount, what we are looking at, from 90 to 81 to 73, not necessarily. One person took 90 rupees. We are assuming that he has deposited it into another bank 90 rupees. What if he has deposited only 60 rupees? Gone. This 81, 73 will not work now. It will not work now. Only how much will go? Let us say 72 rupees only will go. So this credit multiplier is not working in that case if the people are converting the money that they have borrowed into cash, which they can very well do because that is their choice. So keeping these two things in mind, money multiplier and credit multiplier need not be same. The entire credit multiplier need not add really to be a money multiplier because of these two leakages, we can say, or one way we can say blockages. Who will block it? Banks can block it with their excess reserves policy, and people can block it by converting the borrowings that they have taken from another bank into cash. Either way, that credit multiplier in effect will not be converted into the money multiplier. Otherwise, normally credit multiplier, money multiplier works in the same way. They are very closely related. Ultimately, the point is, whatever the monetary base that is increasing, how much it is adding to the money supply. Is it exactly adding equivalent to the credit multiplier? Definitely not. So one way, just keeping these two things in mind, money multiplier usually will be less than the credit multiplier. It is less than the credit multiplier because there are two leakages. So this 5 times money multiplier may not happen. It will reduce a little bit because of excess reserves possibly to be maintained by the banks, or because of people converting their borrowings into cash, or not spending it, just keeping it idle in the form of cash. So that is the difference between money multiplier and credit multiplier, very important aspect also. Now going to the last aspect of this unit, government expenditure, will it have any impact on the money supply? What is the role of government? Will it have? Government also spends, na? Government spends money because it has to pay salaries to its employees. It is the biggest employer also. It is the biggest buyer also. So its expenditure is also there. What impact it will have on the money supply? Another question, quite possible. But point to note here, before entering into the actual impact of the government expenditure, we need to understand the background. First of all, the central governments and state governments have cash balances with RBI. Bank account balances with RBI are there. But if they fall short, which usually they fall short, then this central government and state government, they can avail the facility called as WMA, waste and means advances, or overdraft facility. So basically, central bank is the bank of the government, that we know. That is the government's bank. So government's money, whatever it is, it will be with the deposit with the central bank account only. But if the expenditure they want to actually do more, but cash balances are falling short, then both central government and state governments are eligible to take waste and means advances or overdraft facility. Most of the state governments take them because their receipts and payments, the timing will not match. That is quite common. So they take overdraft, let us say, simple understanding. Then what happened? When this government is taking overdraft, the Reserve Bank of India is lending to the government under this WMA or OD facility. That results in the generation of excess reserves. But mind it, this excess reserves is not the excess reserves which we discussed earlier. Those were bad excess reserves. Those were clogging the money supply. These excess reserves are good for the money supply. Why? Because this money is now with the commercial banks in the RBI. Why is that? If you understand how this happens, what is this secret of how the balances of the commercial banks with RBI will increase? Simply because when the government is incurring expenditure, what the RBI will do? RBI will debit the government balances and credit the receiver. Who is the receiver? Receiver could be some government servant, let us say, and where his account will be? His government servant's account will not be with RBI, it will be with a commercial bank. So what happened effectively? The deposits in the commercial bank have increased, no? And the deposit with RBI has decreased, isn't it? So this deposit with RBI is government's money, that is not related to public money. But when actually the money is into the public's bank account, that starts once again generating the credit multiplier process. If it is with the government, then that will not start the credit multiplier process. When government is taking WMA or OD facility from the Reserve Bank, what is happening effectively is the commercial banks have more money with RBI than earlier. Because of that, some money the commercial banks will be now free to lend to others. When they lend to others, once again the credit multiplier process starts, and that will increase the money supply. So what happens? The excess reserves thus created, and by the way, once again I am repeating, these excess reserves are not the other excess reserves which the commercial banks intentionally wanted to stop. Rather than lending, they wanted to keep them as excess reserves. That was something which reduced the money supply. Here what excess reserves we are talking? These are the excess reserves which the commercial banks will have with RBI. How they got it? Because their accounts in the commercial bank, accounts of the customers who are nobody other than the government servants or the government suppliers, the commercial bank's accounts got deposited with more money from the government through its expenditure. So naturally the deposits are more, naturally the lending will be more. That definitely potentially can lead to an increase in money supply through naturally once again the money multiplier process. So this is how government expenditure also can have an impact on money supply, but of course when, not when it is just spending its own money, when it is taking OD from RBI or WMA from RBI and giving it to the banks. One way it is pumping more money into the system, which was not earlier counted as money supply because it was with government earlier. Now since it is with the public, that is part of money supply. And we know that very well. When we say money supply, that is about money available to the public, not the money that is with the governments. Now simply because of government expenditure, what happened? Money came from government to public, which increases the money supply. That is how government expenditure also can have an impact on money supply. These are the various aspects related to the concept, theories of money supply. Very important aspect, and as I said, formula you have to remember, and numerical questions can be expected from this chapter also related to measurement of money supply. And the concept of money multiplier and credit multiplier is very, very important, and the relationship between each of the factors. What happens if the monetary base increases? What happens if RBI increases CRR or decreases CRR? What happens if a particular commercial bank decides to maintain more reserves than it is supposed to maintain according to the RBI guidelines? What if currency ratio increases? What if TD by DD ratio increases or decreases? Any of them can be questions, technical things. Important, conceptual, easy to remember, easy to understand. Logically, if we approach these things, not complicated. But formulae definitely have to be remembered. M1, M2, M3, M4, NM1, NM2, NM3, L1, L2, L3. Those things definitely have to be remembered. And if those details are given in the question, all that you need to do is write the formula, substitute, do some basic additions and subtractions, get the answer. That's it. That is the unit 2 of chapter 3, money supply. In the next session, we will discuss about the monetary policy of Reserve Bank of India, what is the importance of that, and what kind of measures RBI takes. A very crucial aspect. Everybody in the field of finance should know what are the various terms related to the monetary policy and what is the overall impact of monetary policy on the economy also we should understand, which we will discuss in the next session as part of unit 3 of chapter 3. Till then, take care. Bye bye. Thank you very much.